Have you ever wondered why some people hear sounds that others can't? Sounds that come only when the air turns still, when the world seems to hold its breath, right before something or someone is about to change forever. They say, in the green valleys of Ireland, when the fog curls low, and the moon hides behind the clouds, a woman begins to cry. You can't see her, you can't touch her, but her voice, it slips into your soul. Who is she? Why does her name echo through centuries of fear and wonder? Does she summon death? Or does she guide the lost toward peace? And if you ever heard her weep, would you live to tell the tale? Or would she be crying for you? She is the Banshee, the spirit whose lament drifts between life and death, singing the final song for those about to cross the veil. Tonight, you'll hear her story, a calm, haunting journey through legend and loss, where the mist itself remembers her name. So before we begin, if you enjoy stories that whisper between dream and darkness, consider subscribing now, and let the night carry you gently to the other side of sleep. Now, close your eyes. The air is still. The mist is rising. And somewhere in the distance, the Banshee is about to sing. The night was breathing slowly. That kind of night where even the stars seem to whisper instead of shine. A pale moon hung low over the Irish hills, pouring its light across the fields like spilled milk. Down in the valley, an old traveler walked alone, his boots pressing softly into the damp earth, his breath a faint ghost in the cold air. He had been walking for hours, searching for shelter, but it felt as if the world around him was awake and listening. Somewhere beyond the mist, a river moved. Not rushing, not loud, just whispering, like an old secret being told over and over again. And then he heard it, a sound, so fragile he thought it might be the wind. Then it came again, a woman's cry, trembling and low, carrying a sorrow too deep to belong to the living. He stopped. The air thickened around him, the silence holding its breath. The sound came closer, and something ancient inside him knew. This was no human voice. He whispered to himself, "Is it her, the Banshee?" The fog moved like pale hands, curling through the air. And there, by the riverbank, a shape shimmered. A woman draped in silver, her hair glinting like frost, her gown breathing with the wind. She didn't turn toward him. She only wept, a sound so fragile it felt like the whole world might shatter if she stopped. The traveler stood frozen, listening to the quiet between each breath of her sorrow. And as he listened, the cry began to change. Softened, no longer a scream, but a lullaby. Something meant not to frighten, but to soothe. And in that moment, he realized she wasn't calling death toward the living. She was guiding the dying toward peace. A calm ache spread through his chest. Her song felt like a memory older than time, as if every mother, every lover, every final goodbye was still echoing through her voice. The mist wrapped around him like a blanket, and he felt safe. Safe even in the presence of death. He took a hesitant step forward and whispered, "Why do you cry?" He didn't expect an answer, and yet, for one long heartbeat, the crying stopped. The valley fell into perfect silence. He thought she was gone. Then from the fog came a whisper, soft, trembling, and not of this world. No words, yet he understood. "I cry, so they may cross gently, Tears stung his eyes. Now he understood. The Banshee wasn't a curse. She was compassion itself. She carried grief so others wouldn't have to. And as he watched her dissolve into the dawn, another thought quietly entered his mind. A thought that refused to leave. Have you ever wondered, the one who mourns for everyone, does anyone ever mourn for her? The question drifted through the air like smoke. And somewhere beyond the hills, a soft wind rose, as if the earth itself sighed in answer. When the traveler reached the nearest village, his face was pale, his voice low. He told them what he'd seen. The villagers fell silent. For that very night, an old woman in her sleep had passed, peaceful, smiling. No one had heard her cry, but someone somewhere had cried for her. The valley was quiet again. The dawn spread like gold through the mist, and in that stillness it almost felt like the world had been stitched back together by her voice. If you love calm, mysterious tales like this, stories that drift between dream and darkness, then consider subscribing now and tell me what city and time this story has found you tonight. Long before her voice drifted through the mist, before her name became a whisper feared and pitied alike, she was a woman of the earth. They say she was born in a small village by the western coast of Ireland, where the sea met the cliffs like two ancient lovers locked in endless embrace. Her name was Aisling. She was quiet, gentle, a healer of the old ways. People came to her with their pain, their wounds, their fevers, their grief, and she mended what she could, and prayed softly for what she couldn't. But Aisling carried something rare within her. She could feel when death was near. The air would grow heavy, and the light around a person would dim, like a candle hesitating before the wind. She never feared it. To her, death was not an ending, just another doorway, and she knew how to stand beside that door, silently, gently, waiting with those who had to walk through. The villagers respected her, but they also feared her. How could anyone live so close to death and still smile? They whispered she was half of this world, and half of the next, and maybe she knew it too. One winter evening, the sea grew wild. Waves struck the cliffs with a roar that shook the earth. Her beloved, a sailor, had not returned. All night she waited, listening to the wind, calling his name into the storm. By dawn, the sea fell silent, and the waves returned him to her, pale, still, eyes closed as if dreaming of the tide. Aisling knelt beside him. Her hands trembled against his skin. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She only began to sing. A song so soft it could break the sky. A song born not from fear, but from love breaking. They say that was the first cry. The moment the world first heard the voice that would one day haunt it. Even the sea grew quiet, listening to her sorrow. As time passed, her body faded, but her song remained. The people began to hear her voice in the storms, in the rivers, in the soft breaths of those who were leaving. Her sorrow had become eternal, woven into the veil between the worlds. And so, Aisling became what the living would one day call the Banshee, a spirit of mourning, a guardian of departure. Yet deep within her song, the same question lingered, the same ache that began beside the sea. If love is eternal, why must parting hurt so much? They call her a ghost, but those who truly listen hear something else beneath her cry. Promise, a whisper that says, "No soul crosses alone." Sometimes, when the wind moves slow across the grass, you can still hear her, not screaming, but singing softly, a lullaby for the forgotten. And if you ever do, don't run. Just close your eyes and listen, because maybe she isn't mourning death at all. Maybe she's reminding you to live. Have you ever wondered, the one who cries for everyone, does anyone ever cry for her? The traveler had not forgotten that night by the river. Years had passed, seasons had folded and unfolded, but sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, he could still hear her voice, drifting faintly through memory. A sound like sorrow learning to sleep. He grew older, slower. The world around him changed, but that voice, it lingered like a breath between heartbeats. And on one still evening, when the mist returned to the hills and the air grew cold again, he felt her presence. The wind carried the faintest hum, a low, trembling note, soft as a sigh. He followed it without fear, as though his soul already knew the path. The river waited where it always had, and above it hung the same pale moon, watching, patient, ancient. And then he saw her, no longer distant, no longer veiled. She stood by the water, her form half light, half shadow. Her hair moved like smoke, her eyes deep and endless, as if she carried every twilight that ever was. She did not weep this time. Her lips moved slowly, shaping words the wind could barely hold. "You came back," she said. Her voice was neither human nor spirit. It was the sound of both worlds meeting. He nodded, unable to speak. He wanted to ask so many things. Why she sang, why she stayed, whether she ever found peace. But his voice trembled, lost inside the quiet. She looked at him gently. "Do you remember what I told you?" Her voice was soft, fading. "I cry so they may cross gently." He stepped closer, his breath catching. "But who cries for you?" he whispered. For the first time she smiled, and in that smile was something endless. Tenderness, sorrow, release. "The wind," she said, "when it moves through the grass, that is the world crying for me." A silence followed, beautiful, aching, infinite. The traveler's heart felt light, as if the question he had carried all his life had finally found its answer. The Banshee turned her gaze toward the horizon. The sky was beginning to pale, the first breath of morning curling through the mist. Her form began to fade with it, like dew dissolving in sunlight. He wanted to reach out, to hold her there a little longer, but she only shook her head. "Not all grief must stay," she whispered. "Some must return to the wind." Her outline shimmered, and for an instant, the air was full of voices, soft, layered, like every soul she had ever guided, singing back to her in gratitude. Then she was gone. The river moved again, the hills exhaled, and the world felt whole. The traveler stood alone, but there was no fear in him now, only calm, only quiet. He closed his eyes and listened, and in that stillness, he heard it once more. Her voice, not of mourning, but of peace. It wasn't a cry anymore. It was a lullaby for the living, for the dying, for everyone who has ever loved and lost. And as he walked home, the dawn spreading gold across the fields, he realized something simple, something eternal. She was never the sound of death. She was the sound of love, remembering. The traveler's story did not end with his footsteps. Long after he was gone, his words drifted through the villages like seeds in the wind. People spoke of the man who had met the Banshee and lived to tell of her mercy. At first, they whispered it by the fireside, softly, carefully, as if afraid that speaking her name too loud might summon the fog again. But over time, fear gave way to something gentler, to wonder. They began to believe that when the night turned too still, when the world felt heavy and strange, the Banshee was not bringing death, but carrying love across the dark. In the quiet fields of Ireland, when a family lost someone dear, they would open their windows wide to the night. If they heard a soft cry through the wind, they did not shut their doors in terror. They whispered instead, "She's here. She's helping them home." Generations passed, and her voice became part of the land itself, woven into the rhythm of rivers, hidden in the hush before rain. Sometimes, when the sea moans against the cliffs, it almost sounds like a woman singing, not in sorrow, but in remembrance. Have you ever wondered if legends truly die? Or do they simply become the air we breathe, the sound behind silence? In lonely places, where mist curls over stone, some still feel her presence. A shiver of wind down the neck, a sigh at the edge of hearing, a sudden stillness that feels like someone unseen, standing beside you in kindness. They call her many names now: the morning woman, the gentle shadow, the voice between worlds. But she does not belong to one name, nor to one story, because she was never just a ghost. She was memory given form, grief turned to grace, and perhaps that is why she remains, not haunting the living, but reminding them, reminding us that every ending is a passage, and every cry, a kind of prayer. When the night grows quiet, and the air hums with the softest tremor, listen closely. That isn't fear you feel. It's remembrance. It's love, moving gently through the dark. And if someday, as you drift between waking and dream, you hear a voice, faint, trembling, beautiful, don't be afraid. It's just her, the Banshee, still keeping watch, still carrying the sound of goodbye, so no one ever has to leave in silence. Now the night exhales, the hills are still, the mist has settled, and somewhere far beyond the veil, a voice that once cried for the dying finally rests in peace.